Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey guys, welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brent Aiken, and today is a special day because we are sitting down with our first recurring guest, and that guest is from episode 26, Jerry Varner. And so Jerry, if people listen to that episode, they kind of know who you are. They know what we talked about last time, but let's go ahead and just do a little bit of a recap. Tell us about yourself, and then we'll spend a brief second or two talking about the topic from last time. And then, so just tell us who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Jerry Varner. I've been in full-time student ministry for 27 years, started in 1995, graduated from Nyack College up in Nyack, New York. I have been in my current church, which is Southside Church on the south side of Richmond, Virginia, I just celebrated 18 years ministering to students and young adults and their families. So super pumped to be here. I'm one of those guys that's like, oh, they keep me around. So keep on rocking and rolling. If I wasn't doing this, I don't know what I would do. I grew up in a pastor's home. I'm a pastor's kid. So I've seen what senior pastor looks like, and that's not my thing. So I am so happy to be serving students and young adults. And I'm married my college sweetheart. We have 4 kids. Our youngest kid just turned 18, his last birthday. He's got his birthday's a couple weeks away. So he'll be 19. So it blows my mind that I have 4 adult children. And somehow they age and I don't. I don't know. I mean, I'm bald, but I still feel like I'm in my 20s. I still got plenty left in the tank. So,
yeah.
That's who
and I love that you brought all that up for the sake of like our last conversation was a really, really one that impacted me. I really, really enjoyed our last conversation, and that was longevity in student ministry. And man, I mean, not only were you talking about it, you're living it. 18 years at the same church, been in it for 25, like really, really long time. It's such a cool opportunity to kind of see that side of a profession that normally, I mean, let's be honest, it normally doesn't last too long. And so we have normally a shelf life of like 18 months to like 5 years. And it's terrible. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and check out episode 26, Longevity in Youth Ministry, where we talk about that. I'll link it in the show notes for this one on our website. But great conversation. And it was just one of those things. We started talking about recurring guests, and we're like, man, Jerry needs to come back on this show because it was such a great conversation. And I mean, let's just say, I mean, you're a veteran, man. You have all the wisdom in the world. You've been doing this for so long. So
I don't know about that, but I appreciate that. I'll take it. I'll take it, man. And graciously, humbly, I will take the label of veteran. I love it.
Sure. Yeah. And so I think that it's also kind of cool that the topic today is I very much see something as the longer you are in ministry, the better you do at this. And I think it's something that comes with time and experience. And honestly, let's just be honest, failing at the incorrect way to do this, or succeeding, I guess, more to speak, at the incorrect way to do this. And so our conversation today is calendar boundaries. And so before we get into talking about boundaries, let's spend just a moment. Let's talk about the importance of actually having a calendar, actually scheduling out events, because I have had too many conversations with too many young youth pastors that are like, hey, what's a calendar? Or something to that nature, or like, you give a calendar to parents? I just text them or something like that. What's the importance behind being scheduled out and having a plan and having that calendar that people can access?
So very important. As we all know, like, people are crazy busy. As technology related connected we're just going at a breakneck speed. And so if your ministry doesn't have a calendar where you're able to communicate the things that are going on, the things that are coming up, you're probably the only person or entity in that family's life that doesn't speak into their calendar somehow. And for a lot of families, you got to get in there early, because they book stuff out and they're planning. I've already had emails and parents asking about next summer, because they got to plan their vacation time and all that stuff. So you better have your act together. But yeah, calendars, I think they need to be looked at as guardrails and not as destinations. I feel like sometimes we kind of, like, we youth pastors, we hold our calendar up as like a badge of honor, like, oh, check me out, I'm so busy, or whatever. And I think they just need to be seen as guardrails and not destinations, in that whole comparison trap. I mean, I've been on like Facebook groups with other youth pastors, and every once in a while, somebody, usually like when the next season about to start, like fall season, they'll be like, hey, everybody, show me your calendar. And they're looking for like design, formatting template tips. But really, you can't help but notice, like, man, they got a lot going on. They're doing a lot of stuff. So just be careful of the comparison trap. So I think the calendars really are necessary, but really only to the degree to which they help you fulfill the mission and the vision of your ministry church. So don't become a slave to the calendar. Just use it as for what it is. It's a tool to help you plan things out, to help you communicate. So if you don't have a calendar that anyone in your ministry can easily access at any time, and I would just say with at least the next 3 months laid out, then right after this podcast, that is your first assignment. Our ministry, we use a Google Calendar, which seems so basic and simple, but it works great. And we post the link everywhere. Our leaders, even they wear a lanyard around their neck, and we put a QR code on every lanyard so that anybody at any kind of time can just like scan that code and find out
that's amazing.
What's coming up. So yeah, so have a calendar that is always real time, always easily accessible. I would say go digital. I'm an old school guy. Like, I love printed. I love the feel of paper. I like putting things on my refrigerator, and some people do. So we do like every once in a while we'll print something out for people to grab. But really, I mean, in 2022, there's really no reason why you can't have something online, and Google is so easy to use. So set that up. The next thing that I would say about the importance of creating calendars is to remember that calendars aren't just maps, but they're mirrors too. And I can look at Brent, I can look at your calendar and I can see what you prioritize. I can see where your time goes. So use a calendar, not just to like set a course, but also to like keep yourself in check in regards to just the mission and healthy balance. I generally am not a big believer in balance. I think that's a word that's really elusive. It's like a slippery bar of soap. But with your calendar, you can see it in black and white, like how balanced are you in your ministry. And then lastly, like I think calendars help communicate competence because they show like the most obvious part of the logistics of the plan. Like, what are you doing with what you say you believe? People are way more likely to get involved and be supportive when they know what's coming before it gets here. Communicate, and that's going to help parents, especially parents, you're going to at least appear competent when they have a plan. So, and if you have a volunteer team, if you can communicate like, hey, here's what the plan is over this next month or whatever, you're going to make yourself actually look better as a leader. So those are a few reasons why we ought to be creating calendars.
Wow. So many things that I want to dive into off of that one brief like explanation. And I'm going to try and kind of go off of a few of these. First off, I want to go back to what you said about them being guidelines and not necessarily like the end all be all.
Yeah.
So as far as your calendar, are you one that really tries that once the calendar is like set and firm, like nothing changes, stuff like that, or are y'all fluid with how y'all run things?
It really is. I would probably say I'm probably like 85% pretty solid. Like, once we make a plan, it better be like, the sky splits open, it's a hailstorm, a tornado, something massive has got to like mess it up. Otherwise, we're gonna plow through. So once I set plan in motion. And it's not just me like in a corner somewhere. Like I get input from our student leadership team. I get input from our adult leaders. I try and listen to parents, those things. Cause I mean, I can conjure up ideas all day long, but I want to kind of hit what people are thinking out there. Oh, this would be a good idea. Or let's try that. Or why haven't we done that? Or we did that before, we need to do it again. That kind of thing. So, but yeah, once I get that plan, I really try and stick with it. Because otherwise you create a culture of kind of flimsiness. Like it's like, they're probably just going to cancel anyway. So anyway.
Sure. And then the other thing, like I had to write it down. Like it was one of the best things I've heard on the podcast, I think, in the entirety of all my conversations. Your calendar should be more of a mirror than a map.
Yeah.
Man, do you have anything else to touch on with that? Like what's the downside of, like, I guess using it as let me think through how I'm going to say this. What is the benefit of having it as a mirror over a map, other than obviously, like, I mean, you want people and you want parents and kids to see it, but what's the benefit of a parent seeing this as a mirror and not a map?
Yeah. I think that you can have your calendar sitting in front of you. You can take a step back and you can see literally, like in black and white, you can see how full it is. And you can start to ask questions like, how did I get here? Or what is so important to me that I felt like I had to fill this? Or what boundary or how am I not saying no to? And why am I not saying no to that? Which I think we're going to get to in just a little bit. But I think it's a really good kind of objective, I guess, when you can just look at it and you can say, I'll give you a real life example. Happened earlier today. In fact, I know that our September, this month, I know that our September calendar it's full. Like there is a lot going on. And I had one of our interns, he texted me this morning and he said, I just learned of this need that this guy that I know he has, could our student leadership team come and serve this guy and maybe use it as like a team building thing? That's an awesome idea. That's a fantastic, we should definitely do that. But I said, no, we can't do that. I don't have any more margin to give because I was looking at the calendar and I can see it's full. I don't have any more wiggle room. So October's a different story. So we're going to still help the guy out, still serve him. But in October, we're going to meet those needs. So when you look at it as a mirror, you can start to ask questions like, how do I need to kind of backpedal a little bit? If you find that it's too full, and this may get a little, maybe on the philosophical side, but where is my temperament at? Where are my emotions at? Where am I mentally? A lot of times, maybe it's just me, but I can look at my calendar and I can see how I've actually set myself up to be worn out. Like I have planned exhaustion when I look at my calendar. So that's what I mean by calendars can be mirrors, because they really tell us what's important to us. And we can say, is that really important to me? Or did I get pressured into that or for some other reason?
Well, and I'd take that a step farther and even say that sometimes when we get burned out, we're so event heavy or event hungry that's all we do.
Right.
We just push out more thinking that that's going to fix it. And in all reality, it's just a downward spiral. The more you do, the more you're just tunneling and eventually something's going to give. So very, very good. So what exactly do you mean when you say that youth pastors should be setting boundaries on calendars?
I know that this is like a really subjective concept, but if you're a youth leader, you need to ask yourself, what's the healthy number for you in regards to time out, or however you want to define that, whether, like, I'll just say evenings out per week, because like literally our church has a personnel handbook and it has a number, like this many nights per week, you can't go over that. And so you have to decide for yourself, whether it's an official policy, whether it's just a personal decision or conviction that you make, what's the healthy number for you in regards to evenings out per week. Some churches have a specific policy, maybe yours does, mine does. But I mean, if you're engaged in ministry activities like 5 or 6 nights a week, you are very likely in a really unhealthy situation and you cannot sustain that pace. So here's an exercise that I want everybody to do while you're listening to this. Take out a piece of paper and then you're going to make a grid of 21 boxes. It's going to be 7 across and 3 down. And then over each column, you're going to write the days of the week. So Sunday through Saturday. So now you've got this grid. 7 boxes across, 3 boxes down, and they're all labeled. And what you're going to do is you're going to put an X in 6 of those boxes, but 3 of them have to be on the same day. So choose a day, and that's going to be your Sabbath. A Sabbath, by the way, is probably one of our most easily violated of the 10 commandments, but you gotta pick your Sabbath. So obviously, probably for me and for you, Brent, that's not Sunday. Sunday is not a Sabbath. I do not rest on Sunday. So for me, it's Friday. So I'm looking at my grid, and I got 3 X's underneath Friday. And then you take the other 3 and you just scatter the other 3 wherever you want to, but it can't be less than 6 boxes that have an X in them when you're done. So those are your boundaries. And so for those those boxes that have X's, you do nothing. You do whatever it takes to just rest and refresh yourself. So I learned this strategy in college, and for 27 years, it has been what I built my schedule upon. And I'm not saying that that's like, cut and dry. And sometimes you got to flex and things happen and you got to compensate in different places. But generally speaking, I'm so thankful to my professor for teaching me that, because it really has helped me build a healthy framework. So that's the baseline of where you start boundaries. So I think that's the first thing. You got to decide what's the healthy number for you. I would suggest 6 boxes, however you want to do it, at least 6, however you want to do it. Don't do all of them, because then you're lazy. You lose your job. But
I want 21 days marked off. No,
right.
so that's a really, really good point. And I think it's something that a lot of us do fall into. And like you said, it's really, really hard for us to remember sometimes that we too need a Sabbath. And our Sabbath is not on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Our Sabbath has to be another day of the week, because we are working on Sundays. We are working on Wednesdays. And those days do not count.
Yeah.
And so with that being important, what are some of the boundaries, like you talked about marking these days off, but what are some things that I guess you make time for on these boundary days? Like what's the method of recharge? What do you do to focus on these days off?
Yeah. So I'll just tell you, I'm in a season of change in my own life. I just started a master's degree program, about 20 years too late, but hey, I'm here. Let's go. So I'm gonna have to be creative and find those times, because I have they say 19 to 21 hours per week of work that I'm gonna have to do 6 weeks at a time, back-to-back classes. So I'm in the learning process right now, actually. But I will tell you one thing that I do every Friday morning. I have breakfast at Cracker Barrel. Call me old if you want. Cracker Barrel, with a former student. He's now about 30 years old, his wife and 2 kids. We just have breakfast together, and we laugh and we talk about life, and we support each other. And it's just it's so good for my soul. It's good. It's not ministry related. It's not like this official mentoring relationship or anything like that. It's just something that I know I'm going to come away feeling better and feeling refreshed. Another thing that I do is anything that I get to do with my wife. We like hiking, and so just going out and hiking. We went this past weekend, drive a couple hours to the mountains and just spend several hours hiking. We love that. So whatever it is, I'm not saying like sit at home on the couch and fold your hands. Whatever it is that brings you refreshment, that brings you joy, that refreshes you emotionally and mentally and socially and spiritually, whatever it is, do that. So but setting boundaries.
There's tons of hobbies and things that you can do. One of the things that a lot of I'm sure there are people that would argue with me on this, is recording these episodes and doing this is one of my downtime things. It still is talking about ministry, but I mean, let's be honest, I'm not in it for anything other than the fact of I love my job. And so this is not tied to my ministry, doing my things, talking about all whatever, but it is something that, like, the technical side of podcasting, like, I really, really enjoy. I like the hunt for like new guests and new topics and everything like that. And so this is one of those things that really, really fills me as a person. And I really look forward to doing stuff like this because it's one of those things. It kind of allows you to set your ministry and your focus off of it for a second
Yeah.
and just be present in conversation with other people.
Yeah.
And it's really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah. I
things,
love those too.
people find a hobby and do it.
Yeah.
I know some people that literally like their hobby for their day off is like, I'm just going to go like grill in my backyard,
Mhm.
and I'm going to mow my backyard, and
Yeah.
I'm going to like all this stuff. That's totally fine. And
Yeah.
I definitely, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but I don't think you're saying like you said, like, you don't have to just go sit on the couch and twiddle
Right.
your thumbs.
Right.
You don't have to like take an extra long nap that day, or
Yeah.
if you want to, that's great.
Right.
But like,
Go
you
for it.
don't have to.
Yeah.
You just need to find opportunities to where you can unplug from the ministry you serve in, to
Yeah.
where you can refresh your own mental ability to keep going
Yeah.
and push on.
Yeah.
And it's super, super important.
Yeah.
So boundaries, obviously you have your own personal ones, you have your family ones. How does that look? And I guess this is kind of transitioned over your years in youth ministry. So I guess this would be the way that I kind of gear this question. As your kids and your family dynamics have changed over the years, how has your boundary setting changed?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. One of the things from early on, I'll tell you, I had my dad was pastor of the real small church that we were part of, and this might be, I don't know, I don't know if I'm overstating it, but it just seemed like he was gone a lot. And it just, I mean, he was kind of a lone ranger in ministry. It seemed like he was either in his study getting ready for the next sermon, or visiting people in their homes, or at the hospital, or at the nursing home, or, whatever. And it just seemed like he was gone a lot. And so from the very beginning, for me, I kind of came into married life and parenting life with that baggage, I suppose. And I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be the pastor dad that's always gone, or always saying goodbye, or, whatever. And so I know that your listeners are going to have a lot of different context, but for one, like, I think if you're married, then your spouse absolutely gets veto power over your calendar. They can, like, I shouldn't plan, publish, promote any event without my wife's knowledge.
100%.
Yeah. So that she says, no, that's too much. Yeah, so we have to be really, really careful about that. But yeah, setting boundaries on your calendar, it's going to look different for different people, because and probably you, I can dream up a crazy amount of things to put on the calendar. But then when I stop and take a look at it and really think through how this is going to affect my everyday life, and project that and kind of forecast that, how's it going to affect my levels of energy? How's it going to affect my mood and my temper? How's it going to affect my workload? How's it going to affect my marriage? Then that's when I got to really make sure I keep boundaries in place, because there are going to be people, and maybe even yourself, that come up with really great, good, godly ideas that you shouldn't do. And you have to be able to say, that's a wonderful idea, but we're going to pass on it because it crosses a line, or it violates a Sabbath, or it goes across a boundary that I've established. I can tell you, Brent, over the years, just as much as people have commented on oh, Jerry, that message was really good, that devotion was really good, whatever it was, what you said to me was really good. As much as that has ever happened, just as much I have had people come to me and say, Jerry, when you told me that you couldn't meet on that Friday because that day belonged to your wife, that made a huge impact on me. And so I think we kind of dismiss or discount the impact that we can have when we say no, because we're really setting a really powerful example that it's okay to say no to some things, because you have boundaries and you have priorities, and you set those in place, and you got to kind of keep guard over it. So
no, that's dead on. And you were talking about how everything should be passed through your spouse if you are married.
Yeah.
I literally, we're about to start back up our young adult college community group. And I lead that right now because we don't have another person to lead it. And it's one of those things. I literally was texting my wife earlier this week. I was like, all right, I think we're going to meet on Sundays. Do you want it to be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 5:30, 6:30, or do you want us to wait till 7 or 7:30?
Right.
And she is the check that I pass everything through.
Yeah.
If I do have long trips that I cannot change the schedule of, like, say camp. Like a lot of people go to church camp and it's like a set, you go at this time at this place, and it's not something you can personally choose to change,
Yeah.
then it's something that I put on the calendar
Right.
months ahead of time. So my wife has time to plan around it.
Yeah.
And we can work on being a family around the few times out of the summer that I'm gone that I don't have control over. Then the other times though, especially this past summer, one of the things is I was very intentional about when we did our mission trip, because I knew my oldest two kids would be going to church camp. And so instead of, my wife's a teacher, instead of leaving her home with 3 kids while I'm gone from Sunday to Saturday, I chose to do the mission trip on the week that they were already going to church camp.
Yeah.
And so she was only home with 1 kid that week.
Yeah.
And she had the availability of just like getting to have a little less chaotic of a week when I was gone.
Right.
And so those are super, super important.
Yeah.
So you talked about, I guess, the boundaries. And the thing is obviously there's stuff that is going to happen. I mean, occasionally, you know, especially with boundaries and cancellations and stuff like that, you'll have things that pop up on like sick kids, or, hey, after man, this doctor's appointment popped up and I can't get out of it. Like, or the thing that we all just absolutely love and look forward to, jury duty, all those things. Like there's some like non-negotiables that you can't change, but how do you do your best to work around situations when something can't be avoided happens?
Yeah. I just trust that the people in my life have the grace to be able to kind of flex with it, that this isn't something any of us asked for. We've done our dead level best to kind of, prepare for different scenarios, but there are just emergent things that come up. But I will say, in regards to this question, I will say that I do think boundaries, they give us margin so that we can respond nimbly, because there's always going to be emergencies. So we can't like paint ourselves into a corner so that we're like inflexible and inaccessible. I think when you schedule your calendar, or you set your day or your week or your month, whatever it is, you have to build in those, those buffer times. Anybody who's done any kind of renovation at home knows that it takes twice as long as you think it is. It costs twice as much as you think. But if you think something's going to take an hour, then you ought to budget an hour and a half, or maybe even 2 hours, so that you have that buffer time. So, but as far as emergencies go, I find that, I think we really see what we're made of, and we see how well our boundary system works when an emergency arises, and how quickly we're able to kind of pivot and respond to an emergent situation.
Well, and I would also say, it greatly depends on the church context that you're in. I don't have you have to be in the office from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, or anything like that. And so a lot of times, if I have to be pulled away from my family on one of those marked, like blocked out dates, I try to make it to where another day becomes available that I can replace it with. And it's very, very important, especially, but I would challenge for the youth pastors that are young, or the youth pastors that might be dating someone, or engaged, or newly married, start this now.
Practice now.
Because if you are married with kids and you are just jumping into this, it is going to be a fight. Because you're having to backtrack what you've been teaching your family for months, if not years. It's not impossible, but it's going to be much more of a fight after the fact than if you are preventative and set this now.
I would say, if you're single in ministry, just find a married couple that you love and trust and love you, and just kind of take your calendar to them and say, if this was your situation, how would you handle it? How would you discuss, and just you can kind of use them as almost like a surrogate kind of thing, and really get into that habit, because you don't want to wait to try and figure that out after you get married, if you get married, after you get married, and try and, figure that out. So there's nothing wrong with like forecasting that and getting some practice in, I guess.
Yeah, no, definitely. So other than family, obviously, because that's one of the big boundaries that you have to set
Mhm.
for, of like, hey, there is family time. Do you set any other boundaries that you are like time tested? This, I keep this, other than that Friday morning at Cracker Barrel.
Yeah. That's has become a bit of I won't say like a sacred ground, but it's something that I really, really look forward to. It's kind of an oasis in my week, and I know that it's going to be I know it's going to be good for me and restful. Other than that, this is just super generally on the typical week, my Monday and Tuesday evenings. I really look forward to those because I know that there's generally nothing that's planned or on the schedule. I know Wednesday is going to be a big night for us. Thursday is also a big night. So Monday and Tuesday, I can feel myself on Monday and Tuesday afternoons. This kind of sounds crazy. I can feel like excitement building in my chest, or I can feel like, I know tonight I'm just going to be able to not have a schedule, not have, anything planned. Whatever my wife wants to do, if she just wants, if we want to like walk around Target, or if we want to go for a walk in a park, whatever we want to do, there's really nothing there. So just to have times when you actually have nothing planned, I think is just as important as kind of those fences that we build. Because we really, I think it's why vacation is such a powerful thing. Because now the way that I vacation is I don't like I don't make plans. I don't like schedules. Like there are three acceptable activities: napping, eating, and in or near a body of water. Those are my criteria for the ideal vacation. But
Yeah.
I think that's why it works, because your brain, there's a mental aspect to it. You just get to let down. You get to realize like, oh, no one is going to get me right now. No one's going to reach me right now. I don't have any responsibilities right now. I can just, and I think there's kind of like this letdown, probably even on like the chemical level in our brains. There's just letdown, and I can relax. So I get miniature versions of that for me generally on Mondays and Tuesday nights, and they're just really kind of like catch my breath, relaxing.
Yeah, and that's something that my wife, she's like, I'm glad it works for you, but it really, she's like, I hate this about vacations. It's like when we go on vacations, I'm just like, yeah, whatever, like whatever.
Yeah,
I'm not making decisions.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm done. I don't want to do, like, my vacation is a mental vacation.
yeah,
Like I don't care where we go. I don't care what we do. I don't care where we eat. I don't care how long we stay there.
yeah,
I just want to take a break from and like be able to mentally check out for a little bit.
yeah,
And not necessarily not be present. I'm still there, but
yeah.
like allowing my guard and allowing the
Mhm,
24/7 of like
mhm.
thinking about what needs to go on and what ministry is happening, and
Right.
thinking about kids and calendars and schedules, and I mean, fill in the blank,
Mhm.
that has an opportunity to let up, like you said.
Yeah.
So I guess this kind of comes up in all of the calendar conversations and schedules and boundaries and everything like that. Is there a perfect ratio when it comes to fun versus serious events? Or, and then I guess a more serious question to kind of tagline into that after is, what do you base your calendar decisions off of?
Mhm,
Is there like a rhyme and a reason or a
mhm.
mission that y'all kind of
Yeah,
focus everything on?
yeah, yeah. It's a tough one to answer to because there's not one that like works for everybody, and we're all audiences of one another, and we look at, like, I look at social media, and Instagram and Facebook and stuff. And you just got to decide, like, in your context for your ministry, what's the best combination when it comes to the ratio. There are ministries. There's a local church here in town, seems to be crushing it, and they're posting shots of like packed rooms of kids, all with Bibles open. They got highlighters out. There's a dry erase board at the front of the room. It's full of all this like Greek original language teachings. And it's just like this packed room full of high schoolers with their binders, and they're taking notes. I'm like, wow. But then you also see like there's ministries that it seems like it's just like a party all the time, like nonstop concert, hyped up, like vibe. But we have to be really careful, because I've heard it said that like what you win them with is what keeps them there. So I mean, if you're going hyped events, like you better not let up. Don't let off the gas, because that's the culture that you're creating. So more practically for us, for our ministry, every 4 to 6 weeks, we have what we call a blitz event. And blitz is just a generic term that we use for any event that's designed for like unconnected students in mind. So for an example, every December we do an event called Cookie Blowout, and it's a huge draw for new students, and it's always so much fun. So when our kids say, hey, or when we say to our students, hey, our next blitz event is da da da, they know, all right, they got to be thinking about like, okay, who am I going to invite to that? So that's kind of an outward focus. There's not going to be any prayer circle. There's not going to be like super intimate worship. There's not going to be a long sermon. It's basically just going to be a fun and also maybe serving thing. Like, so like next month, we're doing an event called Rake and Roll. And so I reached out to the leader of our widows ministry, and she's going to line up a bunch of yards of widows in our church. And we're just going to like attack their yard and bag their leaves and haul them out and just roll on to the next one and see how many yards we can do. So, but there are kids out there in the community, maybe have no like spiritual background whatsoever, but they're good people, and they know how to serve, and they know that, you know, they want to love their neighbors. They want to do good things. So even something like that, even of a serve nature, is a great thing, I think, for your connected students to invite unconnected students to. So either of these events are going to draw students who don't have a church home or maybe even a faith to speak of, just because they're invited. I once heard it said over 80% of people would come to whatever your church is doing if someone just invited them. So some people are literally standing there just waiting for someone to ask them. So our students know that when they see or they hear the word blitz, then they should be asking like, okay, who am I inviting? So that's every 4 to 6 weeks for us. And then every week, like our connection, we call our connection and growth events. Those are weekly. So Sunday morning, we have student worship. And in regards to boundaries, like next Sunday, we're going to start a new approach by replacing one of our student worship experiences with what we're calling Bible Dive. And so we're going to replace it. We were doing like a student worship service, and now we're going to do we're going to teach kids how not to just read the Bible or check off their devotional box, but how to actually like dig deeper into God's word, all for the purpose of finding application points. And like every week, kids are going to come away with like, here's how I'm going to live this out this week. And every week they're going to come away with, here's what I'm going to talk to my parents about this week, trying to connect, the home life. So our connection and growth events, they happen weekly. We have small groups on Wednesdays. This is kind of related, but tonight is our last night that we're going to have high school small groups separate from middle school small groups. So starting next week, we're going to have all of our student small groups on one night. And so this summer, I pulled all of our parents and said, hey, if there was one evening or one day out of the week that would be good for your family, for us to do student ministry event, what night would that be? So I just like literally asked that question, and I was blown away, first of all, by the engagement, meaning like the responses that I got. I don't think I've ever gotten that many responses. And then number two, most of the responses were from our high school parents of high schoolers, but most of their responses were that Wednesday night was the better night, not Thursday night. So, and we've been trucking along for years on Thursday night high school small group, and lo and behold, Wednesday night is a better night. So now actually starting next week, speaking of margins and boundaries, like I get to basically come to my wife and say, here's another night of the week that I get to give back to you, that I get to give back to us. So I don't think it's ever wrong just to evaluate and see where things are. Are you hitting the needs of your family? So anyway, so we do connection growth events once a week, and we do our blitz events. What is that, like a 1-to-4 ratio, I guess? But again, you got to discern what's the best fit for your context.
Well, and that's very much what we do too. My big thing with this church has always been like, our focus is Sunday school and worship on Wednesday nights. And then other than that, we meet one Sunday evening a month and we do something fun. We'll go paintball, or it might be more than an evening, but like one weekend we will either go like paintballing, or we'll meet up at the church and we'll do like a video game night where we just have a bunch of consoles and everybody's playing video games, or like this next Sunday, not this upcoming one, but September 18th, we're doing a Nerf war, where everybody brings their own Nerf guns, and It's a great opportunity to bring people and involve people.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, like the whole purpose of those goes back to our mission, and our focus. And I think that's another thing that needs to be kind of talked about is like, if you don't have a mission statement for your group, you need to find one. You need to make one. You need to sit down with people that are like monumental to the success of your group, whether that be students or adult leaders or your pastor or whatever. And you need to iron out a mission statement. The mission statement that we do is literally just like stripped straight off of our church's mission statement, which is love God, love people, offer Christ. And so ours is love God, love students, offer Christ. And so with that though, like everything that we do goes through that lens. Like, okay, Nerf wars, are we loving God? Okay, yeah, I mean, we're going to do this in a way that like is respectable and everything like that. It's not going to get out of hand. Are we loving students through this process? Yes, this is an absolute great way to just like love on kids. Like, doesn't matter if they're regular students or new students or anything. This is a great opportunity for us to love on students. And then is it an opportunity for us to offer Jesus? Like, and yes, it is 100%. And so like we use that filter and that lens for everything that goes through our program. And all of them need to have some aspect or multiple aspects of those three in the event for us to consider it worthy of our time. It's good. And so it's really, really important to do. And it can really, really be something that, like you said, it's just another boundary in place that allows you to be present, but be effective and be intentional with your time too. You don't have to meet 4 nights a week with your youth ministry to be intentional. Make the night or 2 that you meet with your group worth coming to. Let's just be honest. Like, be impactful worth the time you have for those kids, and don't take away the time that the parents already have so little of, especially as they get into junior high and high school. So how can youth pastors take this conversation and begin to implement it? Like, what would be like if they are like, oh man, like I really need to work on this. I have no idea. I've never made a calendar before, kind of thing like that. What is your first step that they can do as they're like taking off from this interview or this podcast?
I want to tell you a little bit about my baggage. First of all, I want to tell you that what like generally when I see less results, less progress, less people, less effectiveness, however you want to measure that, like my immediate response is to do more. I gotta bear down. I gotta offer more. I gotta try more. I gotta do more things. And I've learned that if you always respond with do more, you're not going to last for the long run, which goes back to our whole issue of longevity. Like if you respond to every question with, we'll just add this and add that, and you're going to get burned out quick. I once heard a well-known youth ministry leader share the bigger and better principle. He runs his ministry by asking, how can we make the next one bigger and better than the last one? And honestly, I'm super happy if that works for them, but I think it's more often a recipe for disaster and disappointment. If we're always trying to like outdo ourselves, we got to do more and bigger and better.
That sounds miserable.
That's not sustainable. So we are right now in our ministry going through a significant strategic like downshift in our weekly student ministry schedule, like I said before, because the season calls for it. And I think you just have to look at like where are we right now? Where are you personally as in your position, whether volunteer or paid staff, whatever. And where are we and what's called for? So implement what we're talking about here, but do it in the context of your ministry, because there's no magic answer for everyone. But I really hope that like some of the principles that we talked about can help. Here are a few things to ask that I would ask if I were you. Ask this: am I busier than I want to be? At the beginning of last summer, I went to our executive pastor and I told him that I predicted burnout by the end of the summer, and he sprung into action. And he helped create a plan to relieve me of some of my self-induced pressures. But he also, some of the ministry demands that were too much for me to carry. He kind of helped me get relief from those things. So that's the first question I would ask. Am I busier than I want to be? And if the answer is yes, you move heaven and earth to just change the current landscape. The next thing you can ask is, who can do what I'm doing? And I'll just tell you, I'll confess something to you, like, nobody's going to do it the way I do it. And it's not, and this is just being vulnerable. My ego says it's not going to be as good if I don't do it. But when I don't when I don't invite other people into the vision or into even a task, what I'm doing is I'm robbing them of the joy. I'm robbing them of serving. I'm robbing them of learning. I'm robbing them of growing. So, but when I invite them into the task and I let them understand why it's an important role or an important task, and then I just release them to do it, suddenly I find myself, I just gained a half an hour or an hour each day. It could be sometimes, so ask who can do what I'm doing. Or maybe a better question would be, what am I doing that somebody else could be doing or should be doing? So that's another question I ask on a regular basis. Ask, are my most important relationships the payment that I'm making to keep the pace that I've created? Are my most important relationships the payment I'm making to keep the pace that I've created? Because you're going to find that it's this old adage is true. You always hurt the ones you love. And we generally will take for granted the people that we know are always going to be there. They're going to understand, or they're going to forgive us. But you have to really get bold-faced and ask that question. Are my most important relationships the payment I'm asking to keep the pace that I've created? And then lastly, and this is the big one for me, and I know there might be some people that might disagree with this, I would ask the question, what metric am I using to measure success? It used to be how many people I can get in one place at the same time. And there might be some listeners that like, that's kind of their main metric. But by now we really understand that that's not actually a great metric. It's part of it. I mean, but a crowd doesn't really indicate health. There was a crowd of the crucifixion. So a crowd draws a crowd. There's a principle there. Like when I was in high school and a fight broke out in the next hall, that drew a crowd. So I don't ever look at a crowd and be like, oh, something great is going on. So if you're a leader with a big crowd, good for you. But don't.
I'd even take that to the nature of Jesus didn't really like big crowds either.
Right. Yeah.
Because most of the time when Jesus did a miracle and the crowd got really, really large, it was immediately after that huge miracle and the following that he'd throw the parable out there and confuse the crap out of them. And then they'd all leave.
Right. And they left. Right.
Yeah.
So, So I would say, don't think that God is moving and blessing you because you got a big crowd. The metric that's better than who's coming in is who's going out. Who's living the kingdom where they are. I used to have this hate relationship with sports, because sports meant I had less kids there. But more than me caring about them being in the building or wherever I am at that time, how are they living the kingdom on the soccer field or in show choir and, among their friends? So if you really get serious about that metric, I would dare say that your calendar and how you use your time is going to radically change. If you care more about who has this sent out sense, who has this like commissioning life that they're living, rather than like, oh, I gotta make more options. I gotta create more fun events. I gotta try and bring people in. Obviously you got to make connections with people to send them out. But really at the end of the day, we want to know like who's being sent out or who's engaging the mission of the kingdom right where they are. And that really that's not a programmatic thing, really, off the bat. I mean, programs are not the enemy. I'm not trying to demonize programs, but that can't be the goal. More and more programs can't be our goal. Yeah.
Man, that's so good. So many things with that. I can't help but just say, yeah, I totally agree. And so if this is you and you're sitting in that spot to where you're like, hey, I do need to work on this. Hopefully this has given you some insight and some strategies to get started. Get out there, download, get started on a Google Calendar. Shameless plug, on our website. That is one of the things that we do. We do a free calendar template through Canva that you can download and get started on your own calendar, like literally today. And so with that, it's just an opportunity for you to get started and get a little more organized, more to the nature of you want to protect your own health. You want to protect your own mental
Right.
stability and sanity, and scheduling and calendaring out what you do is super, super important for that.
Yeah.
And man, Jerry, like I really just like want you to be on the show every week. That'd be great.
Okay. Sure.
But
Let's
yeah,
do it.
so with that being said, I think this just about closes up our conversation. It was such a pleasure to have Jerry back on the show. If you like this conversation, you can connect with Jerry. We'll throw his show notes, and we'll throw his social media handle and everything in the show notes for this. But Jerry, real quick, how can they reach you? How can they get in contact with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. It's all Jerry Varner. It's not encrypted or secretive. It's just Jerry Varner. Yeah, at Jerry Varner, and no spaces or underscore or anything like that. If you want to email me, my email is jvarner, just the letter J, Varner at southsidechurchva.org. And I'd love to get an email from you. And yeah, any of those ways are totally fine. Yeah, I have I don't know if this is okay. I have a blog, jerrythinks.com. If you want to reach out through the blog, you can do that. It's not all like ministry related, but it is, pretty heavily ministry, spiritual, devotional types of stuff. So yeah, it's just a place that I very irregularly write my thoughts down, but it's kind of like what you were saying, how this is, you just really enjoy this, Brent, and the whole podcast. That's a place that I go to really just kind of really rest and process and think through. And yeah, so
well, and even one of his posts from Jerry Thinks, we got permission to repost as one of the blog posts on our website. And so if you go, it's the open letter to senior pastors. We released that blog right after he talked about longevity. And it's a really, really good article to read. If you're a reader and like getting out there and reading blog posts and stuff like that. Only other thing I have to say is, we do appreciate you liking, you're liking our podcast on whatever you listen us to. Leave us ratings. It helps us as we climb the ladder on the plethora of podcasts out there that are all kind of trying to gain audiences and gain listeners. So we really appreciate it if you do your part to share this podcast, share this episode, share the podcast with friends. If you'd like to be on the show, there is a link in the show notes on our website to where you can join us as a guest. We'd love to have you on as part of the show. And then also on our website, I'm actually wearing one today. So if you're watching the video of this, you can see it, but we also have shirts. And so you can go to our website, studentministryconversations.org. There is a shop tab, and you can buy this shirt as well as a few others that we have on there. All of the proceeds just help us make this possible, so me and Russell don't go broke trying to do a podcast for free. But we do appreciate anything and everything that you guys can help us out with, whether that's shares, comments, reviews, ratings, sponsoring our podcast, or just buying a t-shirt. We appreciate it all. We do this for you guys, and we hope that we are leaving you each week with a episode that is insightful, that's encouraging, and hopefully driving to push your student ministry to a place that it hasn't been before, or to remind you to continue to push your student ministry to a place that you want it to be. And so until next time, we will see you guys later. Jerry, thanks again. Such an honor, Brent. Man. I love getting to talk to you, and love your insight as you've done ministry. Such a great man, and such a great time-tested veteran when it comes to ministry.
I appreciate that.
Until next time, we will see you guys later. Y'all have a great week.